That would probably be good, yeah. We're gonna do that in editing, so uh, I'm I'm gonna hold up the thing again. Okay, looks better now. Then we can get started. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to another Laboratory Maniacs Deck Tech. I'm Sigi, and joining me today is Sickrobot, a content creator himself and a mentor on the cEDH Discord. Hello, Sick. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Sigi.
That is nice to hear. We are going to be talking about a deck that is near and dear to our hearts today. It's Shuffle Hulk. Some of you may not have heard of that yet, but if you're at all interested in Hulk strategies, then this is one to pay attention to. So, Sick, what is Shuffle Hulk?
Well, Shuffle Hulk is a 4-color Thrasios Tymna Flash Hulk deck. And it has been performing pretty well, and the theory behind it is pretty solid too. So,
Yep.
yeah. It's the deck is basically a super dedicated Hulk deck that is super focused on just trying to assemble either Flash plus Hulk or a sack outlet plus getting Hulk on the board, and then trying to kill people from there.
Yeah, that is indeed what it does. So, Shuffle Hulk initially came about after a Reddit post by user Sleepy Jackdaw in late September of this year. He kind of made a post wondering about how come nobody's using this pile, and then he showed us a pile consisting of the breakfast combo, so Cephalid Illusionist plus Nomad's Encore, and then it has a Blood Artist and a Sack Outlet. You combine that with, in his case, Gaius Blessing in the deck and Narcomoeba to get an Narcomoeba trigger continuously and sack it and drain everyone for lethal.
Yeah, and might I add that when he made that post, he pretty much showed up every Hulk specialist in the format
Yep.
because we had been working on piles, many piles, tried a bunch of them to try to get a win in a single Hulk trigger at instant speed without additional mana, and we had been trying for about half a year at that point, and
Yeah.
he just sort of did it in a single Reddit post. So
Yeah, that one post changed a lot, to say the least.
yeah,
So, thanks to Sleepy Jackdaw at this point, you the man. Yeah. So we saw that post. We all basically went crazy, and we got to work right away. And what came out of it was Shuffle Hulk.
yes,
So about the general Shuffle Hulk shell, what we ended up deciding on or liking the most on paper was more or less a new iteration of your 4-color Verils, or definitely not Verils, or however you want to call it deck.
yeah.
Would you like to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the general shell that we settled on for Shuffle Hulk comes from a deck that I had been working on for a long time before this, called Definitely Not Virals. It is basically just a 4-color port of the original Virals Hulk deck in green black. Basically, the point was to abuse sacrifice outlets and cards like Natural Order and Pattern of Rebirth, so that in addition to having the regular just Flash plus Hulk combo, you could also use the sack outlets that were part of the Hulk piles in order to spark combos as well. And I was working on that for a while to make it work, and the shell just seemed like a perfect fit for a shuffle.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it so far, to say the least. It's pretty good. And then I think with the transition to shuffle, we didn't make that many changes to the overall strategy. Really, it's mostly just replacing the old Hulk piles that you had been using with the shuffle package.
Yeah, pretty much. I think Shuffleholic is only it only takes up one more slot for the combo, and it was pretty much just a direct swap in and out.
Yeah. So, what does Shuffle Hulk do? What is it that makes it so good? What's like, how does the win condition work, and why is being able to win at instant speed in that way so great?
Well, first of all, winning at instant speed is pretty much just a direct bonus on top of anything else. I mean, not a lot of decks can win at instant speed from no board position, and just having that option to be like, oh, in response to your ad nauseum, I'm going to cast my flash and win before you can resolve it, um, is just pretty great no matter how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always just a great bonus, and especially when you're playing in interactive meta games and there's a lot of counter magic being flung around, being able to flash in somebody's end step after they tap out for a turn, or say somebody taps out in somebody else's end step, then you can flash then as well and catch them when they thought they were safe to tap out.
Yeah. Or
Um,
like
just
right on
great.
top of a counter spell wall when people have been throwing interaction left and right, you can just sit at the very end of it and keep your Flash Hulk in hand because like it's only 2 mana. You can just do it
Oh
most
yeah,
of the
just
time.
if there's like a 5 mana combo to do it instant speed, like we've seen it happen all the time when people just like pass with 5 mana open. It's like, oh well, you have ad nauseum. Okay, we'll just make sure to hold up mana. But there's a lot of plausible deniability when you only have 2 mana open, and you can just be like, no, I just didn't have cards to cast this turn. I'm just passing with mana open. Or you have, oh yeah, I have Flash Hulk and I'm just gonna kill you whenever you tap out.
Yep. It's it makes for some very interesting situations at the table. I remember a game in my IRL playgroup where I uh, did some testing on the deck, and the Yisan player who goes after me had a Scavenging Ooze in play with enough mana open to pick me apart. So I basically just put the combo in play because I knew that the other two people didn't have removal, but they were gonna have counter magic later on, and just sat there and waited for the Yisan player to make a mistake. And then when he decided to tap out, so he didn't have access to his Scavenging Ooze activations anymore, I just went for it and won the game.
Yeah, you just get them.
It's
And
really strong.
that's a real strength of the deck, I think, is that it is just it's so often just always in the position to punish misplays from other players or to punish missteps, or you just like the other deck at the table stumbles a bit and it doesn't get its development going early enough, and you just sort of get them
Yep.
because you're just so ready at all points in the game to take advantage of somebody not being at full power.
Yeah, absolutely. So, seeing as we have this powerful instant speed win, how do we like form a game plan around that? How does the deck usually play?
So generally, because we're a dedicated Hulk deck, that in combination with the fact that we have this instant speed game plan with Flash and Hulk, means that we get to do a lot of just sitting back and sandbagging and just waiting until there's not enough interaction at the table to stop us, and just jamming whenever the window opens. I mean, there are definitely the games where you just have a turn two Flash Hulk and you cast Flash and you win the game
Yeah.
because nobody has mana open. And there are the games where even on like turn four you do that just because people tapped out and you just had it. But for the games where people are actually holding up interaction for you, it requires a lot of patience and knowing your windows and knowing when to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's the best way in which you can really take advantage of the instant speed win. You're not locked into trying to win on your turn. So both in deck building and in your game plan, you can afford to just sit back and not have to interact as much when it comes to protecting yourself because you are just able to abuse those windows.
Oh yeah, just the fact that you can just pretty much hold on to all of your counter magic in order to just protect yourself when you go for the win, because a lot of the time you can just rely on other people at the table to have counter magic and for them to stop other people at the table from winning. It's just really powerful because you end up going into the late game, or not even late game, but just mid game with like 3 more cards in hand and more interaction than anybody else at the table.
Yeah, and
It just makes it
just
really
in
powerful.
case, like, where if you see that nobody else at the table has any interaction left, and you're sitting on a bit of counter magic and you're winning combo, and they're trying to stop someone else, you can abuse that again to just win in response.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
I think we should probably also touch on why the combo works at instant speed too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's explain that for a moment.
So the base combo, as Sigi mentioned earlier, is when you flash Hulk, your Hulk trigger gets Cephalid Illusionists, Nomads on Core, Blood Artist, and then a sack outlet such as Viscera Seer or Carrion Feeder. And then what you do from there is you activate Nomads on Core, targeting Cephalid Illusionists, which triggers Cephalid Illusionist and mills 3 cards off the top of your library. This basically just is the same as the breakfast combo and lets you mill your entire deck however many times you want. But the difference here is that instead of having a Dread Return and Laboratory Maniac package, we have a Kozilek and a Narcomoeba in our deck. And what happens is when we hit the Narcomoeba, it comes back onto the battlefield, and then we can sacrifice it and get a Blood Artist trigger. And then when we hit the Kozilek, we can shuffle everything back into our library and keep doing that. And this all happens at instant speed because you can just mill at any time, and you can keep activating Nomads on Core however many times you want.
Yep. One thing that might be important to notice here is like shortcutting rules in relation to this role and slow play, because for some of you this might look an awful lot like Four Horsemen. However, it is not. Uh, the Shuffle Hulk combo is deterministic. It's not slow play because like you can give a fixed number of iterations equal to however many life points your opponents have, but it is conditional because you need to decide
Yes.
do different things depending on whether you mill Narcomoeba or Kozilek first, and that makes it not shortcuttable under tournament rules.
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, it's not a huge deal just because generally whenever you start comboing, people can just concede anyway,
Yeah,
and there's not a huge need to shortcut it. But it is important to note that under current competitive rule sets, you cannot shortcut this combo. You have to play it through, which
yeah,
is not a big problem. I mean, there's only like 2 decision points, or not even that. There's a single decision point during the entire combo. Whenever you hit Narcomoeba
yeah.
before Kozilek or Kozilek before Narcomoeba. But
It's
yeah,
not hard to play through, but it can take a bit. So you you might be sitting there for like 5 minutes or a bit
for
longer if they want you
I'll,
to
I'll
play it
just
out.
say that you're gonna get really good at picking up 3 cards from the top of your
Yes.
library and flipping them over.
Like
And you might want to brush up on your shuffling skills too, and work on getting your shuffle going. You gotta style on some people too sometimes. You gotta break from the riffle shuffle. Go for some waterfalls, you know.
oh boy. Okay. So we've got that. Um we've talked about the instant speed win. Are there any other things that make this deck particularly good?
Yes. So aside from just the Flash Hulk combo, which is a very strong combo in itself, I mean, 2 mana, 2 card instant speed
Yeah.
win is pretty great. Aside from just that, we also have a bunch of cards that let us win without either of those cards in our hand. We run both a Sacrifice Outlet package that takes advantage of them to win the game with single other cards, and we also run a Reanimation package with cards like Entomb and Necromancy. And as we all know, Necromancy is a pretty good card with Hulk because if you cast it at instant speed, it will sacrifice itself during the next end step and get you a Hulk trigger.
Yep.
So there are the 3 distinct packages in the deck. So we have the Flash Hulk combo and all the tutors that get that, such as Merchant Scroll and Summoner's Pact, that are specifically for that combo. But we also have cards like Academy Rector and Pattern of Rebirth and Natural Order that can combo with a single sack outlet and another creature just to win the game because you can sacrifice them to the sacrifice outlet, such as like you sacrifice an Academy Rectress to the sacrifice outlet. You would get the Pattern of Rebirth to put it on any other creature that you control, and then you sacrifice that creature, trigger Pattern of Rebirth, and then you go and get Protean Hulk, and then you can sacrifice that to the sacrifice outlet and go for the win there.
Seems good.
And and then yeah, with the reanimation package, it's pretty great too. You can just cast Entomb plus Necromancy, which is also a win that can win on other people's turns. I mean, not necessarily an instant speed because you have to wait until their cleanup step, but you still get to win not on your own turn.
Yeah. And that, as we've already explained, is quite useful. Another cool thing about this deck is that it, in my opinion at least, plays really well off the top. Like, if you've gone for a win attempt and you've been stopped and you're kind of in top deck mode, then this is still a really good deck to play because, like, finding basically any tutor from that point guarantees that you'll be able to go again very soon.
Oh yeah, well, one of the big concepts of the deck, and one of the main concepts of my previous Hulk decks, like Definitely Not for Alls or the 4-color Sacrifice Hulk deck, that carried over into this build, is that I really like running with the concept of any two tutors in the deck with each other will win the game. Which just, it gives you a huge amount of consistency and just great top decks a lot of the time, because you can have any other tutor in your hand and then you hit another one off the top and you just get to win. Or you have, a lot of the time, just a combo piece and then you hit like 75% of the tutors in the deck will get you a win.
Yeah. It is quite good in that way. So,
yeah,
we've talked about the good, and there is a lot of good in this deck.
Yep.
Is there anything this deck struggles with?
It struggles a bit. Particularly in the grind game, it doesn't have, unlike something like Paradox Scepter Thrasios, where your whole game plan revolves around having a lot of mana producing permanents and then just winning because you have those, where even if you don't have a Paradox Engine or an Isochron Scepter ready to go, you can still feed all that mana into Thrasios and generate a bunch of advantage and just go from there. We don't really have a lot of that. Our game plan is focused on being pretty mana efficient, so we don't really need a lot of acceleration, which means that we don't really take advantage of Thrasios that much. And in the later games, when there are creatures on the board, we also can't really take advantage of Tymna either. So you can definitely get into the long games where you just get stuck with not a lot of cards in hand, and especially if there's a hate piece on board for you, it can get a bit rough.
Yeah, that does seem to be kind of the crux to Hulk decks, and more or less what keeps them in check in the overarching cEDH meta. Along with that, there is of course the typical Hulk issue of drawing your combo pieces.
Yeah.
However,
it's never a good feeling to draw an Narcomoeba or draw a Blood Artist when you really want them in your deck so that you can get them with the Protean Hulk.
Yeah, the one good thing about both this deck and the Breakfast Hulk deck is that all the pile pieces are 1 to 2 mana. So even if you draw them, it is of course going to set you back, but you can cast them and you're still going to be able to go off. It's not too bad, just like a bit of an annoyance. Yeah.
And also, we do have a couple of ways to deal with having a combo piece in our hand in the Shuffle Hulk deck. They're not super consistent unless you're playing a couple of extra cards to make it work, but there are some ways where you can combo with a combo piece in hand.
Yeah.
Another problem that you can have with Shuffle Hulk build, especially with the stock build that I think a lot of us are playing right now, or versions of it that are close to that build, is that you tend to be pretty light on interaction. You're generally playing interaction like counterspells and removal in this deck to further your own win con and not necessarily to stop other people from winning. So we're missing things like negate, like delay, like counterspell, even sometimes like mana drain, just because they're pretty expensive. 2 mana is a lot more than 1 mana when you're trying to be mana efficient on your win cons. So definitely going to be some games where you have to rely on other people to stop each other from winning, and you're just not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, it is something you're gonna have to get comfortable with to an extent.
Yeah. You can definitely mitigate that weakness just by changing your playstyle and adapting to it, but it's a definite weakness that the deck has sometimes.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned earlier is hate pieces.
Yes.
Uh, I think we should mention that a good number of like commonly used Hulk hate pieces do not work against this deck. Please tell me, why is
Yeah.
that the case, and which pieces are those?
Well, first of all, that was a big reason why a lot of us were excited about this
Yeah.
build after the initial excitement was because we figured out that there's ways to get around a lot of the typical Hulk hate pieces, and that's using a card called Memory's Journey. Now, what Memory's Journey does, it's a 2 mana instant, but we don't really care about that. We care that it has flashback for a green. And what it does is it shuffles 3 target cards from a graveyard into the owner's library, which is really good because we get to Flash Hulk and then get our entire combo off of one trigger. So at that point, we don't care if the Hulk gets exiled or if it leaves play or gets shuffled back into our library or whatever, because we don't actually have to use the Hulk again. And then at that point, if anybody ever tries to use a one-shot Grave Hate on our graveyard, such as Tormod's Crypt, Fairy Macabre, um, Deathrite Shaman, Relic of Progenitus, any of these cards, we can actually keep milling our library until we hit a Memory's Journey, shuffle our required combo pieces back into our library, and then keep comboing on top of their hate piece on the stack,
Yep.
which is just like huge. That's insane. Just for an extra
It's
green, you get to ignore any one-shot Grave Hate.
it's
That's like
really sick.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how the existence of this has basically devalued one shot graveyard hate to an extent that it's probably not worth running anymore in a lot of decks.
Yeah, I mean, like just there's so little opportunity cost, or not even opportunity, but just cost in general for the Shuffle Hulk player to be able to play around them. I mean, just like having an extra green mana
Yeah.
up is not a big deal when your main combo is 2 mana anyway. Like, oh, just having 3 mana. Yeah, okay, cool. That's like a mana crypt and I'm good to go.
Yeah,
Um, and
it's
it's good to note
tough.
as well. Yeah, it's good to note as well, actually, that the Memory's Journey also gets around removal spells too. So let's say you try to Abrupt Decay one of my dudes, I can just shuffle my combo pieces back in my library in response and kill you on top of it.
Yep.
Like, I don't actually care about it that much. Um,
It's
Obviously, like, having multiple one-shot hate pieces is a thing, but a lot of the time, I'd say it's just less efficient now than just playing something like Rest in Peace or Grafdigger's Cage against the deck.
yeah. It if like basically if the Shuffle Hulk deck gets to the point where it has the combo on the field and it's able to do it, there's really not that much you can do to stop it.
Yeah, you really just want to stop them from ever getting the Hulk trigger in the first place. I mean, once you've had a single Hulk trigger, it gets so much easier to deal with any onboard hate, or just play around any potential hate in general.
Yep. So playing around hate is definitely a big part of a Hulk deck when it comes to deck building and specifically constructing piles. You've also brought up that there may be some awkwardness if you get like an Archimedes or a Kozilek in hand. What can we do inside of Hulk piles to deal with those issues?
Well, for the main build right now, we have a workaround in place, which is a card called Body Snatcher. Now, what Body Snatcher does is it's a 4 mana creature. When it enters the battlefield, you have to discard a card from your hand or it gets exiled. But it is good to note that it is not a replacement effect, that is a trigger. So you don't actually have to discard a creature card if you don't want to. The other part of it is that once you sacrifice Body Snatcher, you can exile it from your graveyard and reanimate a creature. So let's say you have a Narcomoeba stuck in your hand. Instead of going for the full pile off of the first Hulk trigger, you get a Hulk trigger, you get a Sacrifice Outlet and the Body Snatcher. You use the Body Snatcher's Enters the Battlefield trigger to discard the Narcomoeba, and then you sacrifice the Body Snatcher to get back the Protein Hulk, and sacrifice the Protein Hulk again to go for the full combo. And at that point, you can just shuffle the Narcomoeba back into your library with a Kozilek or a Guy's Blessing and just combo from there. And the same thing with the Kozilek. You can discard the Kozilek, and then with the shuffle trigger on the stack, you can sacrifice the Body Snatcher to reanimate the Protein Hulk and combo.
Yeah, it's a very useful thing to have because from a long time of playing Breakfast, I've also encountered enough games where I've just had one of the pieces I want in my graveyard stuck in my hand. We initially used Cabal Therapy as a workaround for that, but ended up finding Body Snatcher to be a lot more synergistic with just how the deck works.
Yeah, we've come a long way from the Phantasmagorian days of
Yes,
Breakfast.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, those were definitely some interesting days back then.
They were growing pains. We'll leave it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. So, what can we do in terms of maybe like slotting in different cards if we want to beat on-board hate, like a Cursed Totem, like a Linvala, that kind of stuff?
So we actually have ways to beat Cursed Totem and Linvala built into the deck. You do need a couple of slots, but they're not actually that bad, and they give you a lot of play into those decks. So if you are seeing a lot of, say, Cursed Totem or Linvala in your meta, what you can do is you can actually swap out Body Snatcher for Spellseeker and Reanimate. And what that lets you do is, on your turn, if there's a Cursed Totem or a Linvala on the board, you can Flash Hulk, get the Spellseeker, which gets Reanimate, and then you can get a Sacrifice Outlet, and then you can get something like a Gilded Drake or a Lean In Relic Seeker, or Lean In Relic Warder, rather, which lets you remove the Linvala or the Cursed Totem, and then you use the Reanimate to reanimate Protein Hulk and sacrifice it with the Sac Outlet, and you're good to go.
Yeah. It's quite nice. The same
Yeah.
Spellseeker pile, if you're not against hate, can also be used to grab Grand Abolisher on your turn, if you so desire.
Oh yeah, you can just go for the uninteractable Breakfast Classic of just going for Sacrifice Outlet, Spellseeker, Grand Abolisher, and just locking people out of interacting with you at all.
Yeah. On that note, however, that like the Grand Abolisher has kind of lost a bit of value because of the Murray's Journey backup. We just get more or less a free layer of protection now, so that is usually enough to get there.
Yeah, and also that paired with the fact that we can win at instant speed now is a huge deal because it just devalues Grand Abolisher a lot, because after you start winning at instant speed, he doesn't really do much, and you just it's just such a good thing to be able to do anyway that yeah. He's become a lot more niche than he was in just Breakfast days of just always getting Grand Abolisher because why not?
Very true. So we've gone a bit over what you can do with different Hulk piles. Let's extend that to the rest of the deck and look at a few key card choices.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of you might be asking about the Kozilek versus Guy's Blessing, because we've mentioned both of them, and it might be a bit confusing which one we're using, which one we're not. Originally, the Reddit post by Sleepy Jackdaw originally used Guy's Blessing as the shuffler. And I think that was just because it is probably one of the more well-known, just because it's playing Get Rog 2. I think I might see play in some Eternal formats. Who knows? But the reason why we play Kozilek, and we play Kozilek in a lot of our builds now, is because it has a shuffle effect that triggers from anywhere. So when it goes to the graveyard from your library, it still works. When it goes to the graveyard from your hand, still works. When it goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, it still works. As opposed to Guy's Blessing, which has to go to your graveyard from your library. Which means that if you have a blessing stuck in your hand, it becomes a lot harder to combo, because you need to both get it into the graveyard and then back into your library to mill it again, or you need to get into your library somehow. So you have to have something like a Brainstorm or like a Noxious Arrival, as opposed to Kozilek, where you can just discard it and you're good to go off to the races.
Yep. It was kind of funny because I think in like the first or second ever game I played on the deck, that very interaction, like we initially had Gaius Blessing because of the Reddit post, but then in a super early game, that interaction actually came up, and I had the Gaius Blessing stuck in my hand, and I wasn't able to win because of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we swapped it as soon as you drew the Guy's Blessing
Yep.
because it was like, oh yeah, I don't know why we're playing this card when we could just play something that we could actually combo with instead.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm glad that we found out that quickly, because that could have taken a while otherwise.
Oh yeah. No, I mean I could definitely see us being like 2 months down the line and just be like, why are we playing this card? Jesus Christ.
Yep. But well,
It is good. It is good to note though that there are some builds running around with an ad nause package, just because the rest of the deck, apart from Hulk, is so slim anyway. Because again, we're being very mana efficient with all of our cards. In those types of decks, you generally want to swap out the Kozilek for the Blessing, just because 2 CMC is way less than 11 CMC
yeah.
for
Unless you're
getting
me
hit
and
off
you
of ad
just
nause.
play Naz and Kozilek, because
Yes.
I like to live dangerously.
And would you ever ad nause without an Angel's Grace active? That's a question you have to ask yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, in my build of Shufflehug, I actually only play Ad Nauseam. I don't do Naz Grace.
Oh, really? Okay. I can
Yeah,
see that being more slot efficient, just using ad nauseum as a one card win con sometimes. Where say you rip a mystical tutor, and
yeah,
you don't have a
that's
lot of other
pretty much the
stuff
idea.
going on. Yeah. We also have a sort of weird card choice. If you're perusing the Shovel Hulk list, you might recognize that there's no Swords to Plowshares. And that is for a couple of reasons, actually. First of all, we're not really that heavily reliant on white mana. In fact, we sort of want to cut out as much white mana as possible from our deck and just be a base bug deck to increase our mana consistency and just make sure that we have all of our colors that matter as much as possible. So that's a big reason. But another big reason is from my days of playing straight green black Hulk and D&V even sometimes. Um, Source of Plowshares can't kill your own Hulk.
Hmm.
So if you target your own Hulk with Source of Plowshares, it just gets exiled and you don't get a trigger. So instead of playing Source of Plowshares, we actually play Pondify or Rapid Hybridization because they're effectively the same card. I mean, the 3/3 is a downside, but there are definitely times where you just have to put a Hulk on board with, say, a natural order, and you don't have a way to kill it off. And just having the extra access to that, say, like with a Mystical Tutor or something, or you just have it in hand, just being able to kill off your own Hulk manually is a relevant thing sometimes.
Yep, absolutely. And on top of that, we got the classic, of course, it pitches to Force of Will.
Oh yes, blue cards are great. You could
Yes,
play just a blue card that does nothing, and it would be better than a lot of other cards just because it pitches to Force of Will.
yep. Blue is such a good color. Okay,
Oh, blue is fantastic.
so we've gone over a couple of card choices. We've already gone into a bit about what you can do with different builds of the deck. Now, let's elaborate on that. What kind of builds have we seen people play or try out or put together of this deck?
Well, I think we've seen four distinct variations, not counting some of the just card swaps, but actual like four different engines slash packages that have been slotted into the deck. One big one is the ad nauseum Angel's Grace deck, which typically ends up coming with Bomberman or Exhalger's and LED just to help win off of the LED instead of having to be worried about getting Hulk pieces stuck in your hand. I've seen some people test with it, and it seems pretty good actually. You can just win the game off of a single tutor sometimes, which is pretty great. And
Mm-hmm.
then just having the combo that's not reliant on just like having the ability to add Naz with a rip in play, find a removal spell, and then combo anyway is pretty great. Or even you can swap in other combos that don't need the grave at all, and then
Yeah.
win with those instead. And just avoiding one vector of hit against the deck is pretty cool.
Yeah. Also, the Bomberman part is nice because it actually works through Grafdigger's Cage.
Yes, that's a big one. Cage is one of the probably the most widely played Hulk hate piece, just because it hits Hulk so much. It hits a lot of other people, and it's very easy to play through when you're not on Hulk. If you're
Yeah.
just playing something like Consultation or Storm, you're losing like some flashback stuff, but your main game plan is still online, and it's a 1 mana hate piece, so it comes down super early too.
Hmm. Speaking of consult, that's another thing that I've seen in a different build of this deck. The like Lab Maniac Demonic Consultation combo as a way to have some backup that works through every sort of hate. Like, it doesn't care about Curse Totem, it doesn't care about Rest in Peace. It basically cares about nothing.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah, I think Shaper Savant was working on a build of the deck for a long time because I think he just hates extensive Hulk packages and he hates drawing Hulk pieces. Um, but I can never really see where it comes from. Yeah, the packages you just play Laboratory Maniac and then you play I think Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact. Just because Tainted Pact is a fine card. It's not that good in Hulk because you don't really want to hit your Hulk pieces, but it's
Yeah.
still sometimes a tutor. Um, but yeah, it just gives you the vector of just winning through Hulk hate, which is pretty nice. You can also, yeah, I think it's a lot better in styles of Breakfast, where you're already playing the Laboratory Maniac and just having the extra win con piece is pretty nice.
Yeah, I agree. Tainted Pact is something I've been toying around with for a potential breakfast update because it's just one card and it can be useful outside of the combo.
Yeah. And then we've also had sort of weirdly, but not that weirdly, I guess. We've had some people porting Shuffle Hulk like shells to 5 color in mostly in Agila. I think I've
Yep.
seen a Tazri deck or two floating around, but mostly in Agila. And they've made some swaps that I mean the when you're allowed to execute that Hulk combo, it is strictly better in a lot of ways, but it's really iffy on when you're
It's
actually allowed to use that combo.
yeah. So what we're talking about is a pile of breakfast plus uh, I always forget the name of that card.
It is Volrath's Shapeshifter.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
So what that does is you basically keep milling your deck, hoping to have the top card of your graveyard be the needed combo creature that will be copied by
Well,
Shapeshifter.
well, that's not the hard part because you're allowed to determine which order cards go to your graveyard in. The hard part is you have to hit all of the cards in order.
Yep.
So you have to. It uses I think like 3 creatures to do a combo where you turn Shapeshifter into something that can activate its ability and then reset it and turn it into something else and keep doing that. But yeah, like you have to hit I think all 3 in order multiple times to actually kill the table, which is like that's very strictly into 4 horseman territory.
Yes. So if you're ever planning on taking something like this to an EDH tournament, don't do the Shapeshifter piles
Yeah.
because they are very, very non-deterministic, and I don't think anyone wants to be sitting there for possibly days on end just shuffling their deck.
Oh yeah. Well, just be happy that if anybody does bring it to a real life event, you can just call slow play on them.
Yeah.
You just wait until they hit the same game state twice, and then you force them to move on. You're good to go.
Yep. Okay, so those are like different things that people have been toying around with for Shuffle Hulk. So there's definitely more than just the version we're looking at today. And if you're interested in the deck, I highly recommend checking those out because there might be something in there that works better for your meta.
Or
That,
or even for your
yeah,
playstyle. I
or
mean,
that, yeah.
yeah, playstyle is a big thing too. Just before we move on, sorry, I sort of want to touch on one more package swap that we touched on earlier, but just a quick touch for it is swapping out Body Snatcher for Spellseeker and Reanimate.
Oh yeah,
It's definitely a valid meta swap, not just for say Curse Home and Linvala, but also sometimes you want to have Spellseeker in the deck just because Spellseeker is actually an okay tutor sometimes as well. It can go get Summoner's Pact or Flash or any other tutor chain that you want to go for. And it can be a good swap sometimes if you need additional utility after you Flash Hulk.
yeah. I
Yeah.
Fully agree. I'm currently on Spellseeker just as a tutor, simply because it can get either half of the combo or just random other stuff. I'm not on Reanimate, but that one is at the top of my like flex list of things to put in.
Yeah.
And that's another really good way in which you can adjust the deck for your meta, because we have a bunch of flex slots and we have a good number of cards we can fill those with. What are they?
Yes. Well, just before we get into this, I think this is a thing that should be said for I think every deck, but especially Shuffle Hulk, is that you should definitely adjust the deck for your meta. Don't just take the stock list from online or just rip somebody's list and then just try to play that all the time. I definitely suggest taking it into a group play session. Just test it out, see what needs to be made swaps. Even just looking at a list before you take it into a play group, and just making swaps that you think make sense. It's a huge part of upping your win rate with the deck and just making sure that it's well tuned to what you're going to be playing in.
Yeah,
That being
absolutely.
said, some of the cards that I think me and Sigi have both really liked in specific meta situations and specific pod compositions are Null Rod. Null
Mm,
Rod is great against pretty much any style of PST deck or any non-green deck, just because they're relying so much on rocks for their mana development.
yeah,
Um, just yeah, being able to just like slap down basically what is a 2 mana lock spell that you're not affected at all by is just huge.
yeah, it's
It just
super good.
yeah, it just sets back the table way further than it should, which
Yep.
is great in some cases. You can
And
also
if we like consider what the let's say stiffest competition for Shuffle Hulk is, or the deck that can best take advantage of a game situation after we've been stopped once, then the two that come to my mind are PST and Razorcats, and both of
yeah, I
those kind of have trouble dealing with Null Rod.
I would definitely agree with that. I'd throw consultation into that as well. Consultation
Oh yeah,
can really take advantage of a Hulk deck being at the table if they're well equipped to handle it. Say if they have like any amount, like maybe 2 Pyroclasms, Graph Digger's Cage, a bunch of counter magic set up ready to go, they can super easily take advantage of you being at the table. And Null Rod helps deal with a lot of those decks. Maybe not Razakats as much because
oh yeah,
I
that's true.
mean they
They can
can just
get
yeah
some
they just
interaction.
tutor removal spell for it when they're already
True.
going, and it doesn't really stop them from winning. But still, just shutting down 2 of your main opposition decks is pretty great. Uh, Another card that can deal with opponents' stacks pieces is Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah.
You might notice that we're not playing it in the base list, and that's because generally Cyclonic Rift isn't as good as Chain of Vapor just because it costs the extra mana, and you're a lot of the time in non-stack spots just needing to remove a single thing, or like bounce one of your own, I don't know, like a Soul Ring, a Mana Crypt, just to generate a bit of extra mana. But in stacks heavy metas or metas that are playing a lot of things like bears that shut you down, containment priests, multiple people playing Graph Digger's Cages, anything like that, Cyclonic Rift can be super valuable just because you go into the late game and then Cyc Rift on somebody's end step and
Yeah.
get rid of all the hate pieces.
I've won so many games on Teferi by just doing that. It's kind of silly at this point.
Oh yeah, and I think it's one of the easier swaps to make too. I mean, there's not a whole lot of opportunity cost if you just make the swap of a removal spell for
Yeah.
Cyc Rift.
And like
Um,
hypothetically, I think one thing you shortly brought up not too long ago, in theory, we could make a version of this deck that leans a bit more on getting more mana. So like we could slot in Bloom Tender along with it, for
yeah,
instance.
that's something that I've been looking at recently and toying around with is playing one or two just large mana engines in the deck to sort of help with the long game against something like PST or something like Razakats. Yeah, just playing something like Bloom Tender, playing even like a Priest of Titania in the deck. Uh, those would all go really well with the Cyc Rift because they just let you fuel the mana that you need to cast an overloaded Cyclonic Rift.
Yep.
Just sort of touching on that too, I've actually been testing out a version with Bloom Tender and with Free from the Real, sort of
Ooh.
taking inspiration from the PST with Doomsday
Mm-hmm.
from the ranked meta, but just as sort of just an alternate win con where I'm sort of wanting to play the Bloom Tender anyway, and just having the option to go for a non-grave based combo is actually pretty nice. It hasn't come up yet, but I'm looking at testing it out more.
Yeah, that might be cool. I've seen a few people put that into decks here and there, like Cameron's recently made an update to Tassiger where he is playing that combo as well.
Yeah. Another one that I sort of came up with. Well, I don't know, came up with, but that I used to great effect in some of the Discord ranked games was the Beseiju and Crop Rotation package,
Oh yeah.
which is just great into any meta that is just bogged down with nothing but blue decks. I mean, we there was a long stretch of time there where pretty much every right game was going to like, oh, there are three Hulk decks at the table that all have Flash in hand and they could all win at instant speed. So whoever casts Flash first loses. And then there's one other person that's doing like just counter spells and just stopping everybody else from winning. So we'd go into just like, yeah, we're at like turn 16 of just everybody holding up Flash because we can't really do anything. And
Nice.
Beseiju is just great for those types of games because
Yeah.
like if you just like stop somebody from flashing, and then you like end step crop rotation into Beseiju, and then just cast an uncounterable flash. Especially with Shuffle's resiliency post flash, it's just so hard to do anything about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think when the meta is like that and you want to keep playing a deck like Hulk, then taking those kind of measures is a very good thing. Like, similarly, I've put Cavern of Souls into breakfast for a while because it lets me like play an uncounterable Grand Abolisher, which then lets me win.
Oh yeah,
And
and that's
those kind of
also
lines are, I feel, somewhat undervalued if, of course, they are in the right context.
yeah. I think a lot of the time people will see card choices like that in a deck, and they'll be like, "Oh, why are you playing this really niche card? Like this seems strictly worse than just like having an untapped land." And it is a lot of the time, but when you are playing in these very specific metas, there's a lot to be said about tuning specifically for those metas. Just making changes that make sense and where you're still playing good cards, but the cards that are more tuned to the decks that you're playing against.
Yeah, it's a very good thing to keep in mind when you're picking up this deck or any other deck. Just take a good long look at the deck and identify which of these cards you might be able to shift around to get more of an edge against the decks you're gonna be playing against.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, and another swap. We got one more here. One more major one is Aven Mind Sensor.
Oh yeah.
Now, Aven Mind Sensor is a pretty messed up card in general. I'm just gonna come out and say that outright. It is way too good for how much it costs. I mean, 3 mana is a lot of mana, but it's still
Yep.
like it's a stranglehold on a stick with flash for 3 mana. Like I
It's
don't know,
kind of
man.
crazy.
It's even Mind Sensor is like probably one of the more splashable sideboard meta swaps. Just because like you could put it into like anything. I don't know, like you're playing like any 3-4 color meta and you just like hit people's fetch lands with it. Yeah, sure, like that's good enough. But like where it really shines is against other Hulk decks or other Razaketh
Oh
decks,
yeah.
where their win cons involve searching their library, and just having a generic hate piece that's good anyway, but also happens to shut down their win conditions is just super strong.
Yep.
And that's
It's
just that,
done a
that's
lot
not
of
even
work.
counting. Yeah, it's not even counting the fact that it's also a flyer, which means that you just get free Timna beats sometimes.
Yep.
Just it converts itself into an extra card every turn. Like I don't know, what's not to love?
It's a really, really good card and one that I think quite clearly was not made with EDH in mind.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things that have to go right in a format for even Mind Sensor to be useful, but oh my god, did it go right in this format?
Yep. It's a really, really good card and like even in decks such as PST, it can be a useful slot in.
Oh yeah, I think like any deck that has white in it should probably just consider Mind Sensor for its flex slots or even for main deck slots sometimes, just because it just hits such a wide swath of cards, and it's really good at locking people out of coming back from a game. Say
Yeah.
you're all on a really low resource situation, Mind Sensor pretty much shuts off every tutor from their deck from being a live draw. I mean, to a degree, but like a lot of the time, it'll just be like, oh yeah, like none of your tutors are going to find any of the cards
Mm-hmm.
that win you the game anymore. So
Yeah.
like that alone is like 25% of a lot of cEDH decks. It's really good in those situations.
It's amazing. Like if you consider that almost all of the consistency we have in this format comes from playing a ton of tutors that turn any one copy of an effect into like five or six, and you turn off five of those six copies of the card that can deal with Aven Mind Sensor, then yeah, it's quite impressive.
Oh yeah,
Okay, but
that yeah
enough about Aven Mind Sensor. It's a good card. Please consider playing it. Uh, as like a last bit, we usually do a few opening hands on here.
yeah
We've got three opening hands prepared today. Let's do the first one of those.
sure. So the first one that we have here uh, is a bit of a 50-50 hand. It's a bit of a pod dependent and a bit of a risky hand. The cards in it are Toxic Deluge, Limduel's Vault, Protean Hulk, Polluted Delta, Nature's Claim, Merchant Scroll, and Arbor Elf.
Whew, yeah, that is a tough one. So
Well, one landers is always going to be a problem for pretty much any
yeah,
deck unless you have extra mana production. But we also have
it's
the added access of awkwardness where you're only going to have a guaranteed access to two colors of mana in this opening hand, which is sort of awkward when we're dealing with bug cards. So,
yep. Like the play on this kind of hand is gonna be like turn one Delta fetch drop, play Arbor Elf, turn two either we rip a land or we don't, and if we don't we just cast
yeah,
Merchant Scroll and then we try to win on turn three with zero protection and not even Memory's Journey backup.
yeah. This hand is, I think it's going to be dependent on the pod comp a lot of the time. If you're playing in a pod with Mono Black Sidisi, Godo, and some and like Grenzo Doomsday, yeah, this hand is keepable.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed going to get to a turn three win. That's about as fast as you can ask for consistently. So not bad there. But if you're looking at any amount of interaction from any of the other decks at the table, I'd probably ship this one.
Yeah, same. It's just not safe enough. And I mean, of course, you can hope to get interaction or more mana off the top of your deck, but I really wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah,
And like
I mean if this
this hand
if
doesn't
there was
cost.
like a if there's a cantrip instead of a toxic deluge or instead of the nature's claim, I think this would be a lot more keepable. But
Yeah.
as is,
Another big thing about this hand is it doesn't cast Timna.
it does not. White mana, you don't need a lot of it, but you generally want at least one source at some point in this deck, just because Timna is also a messed up card. It generates way more cards than it should.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, you can just lean on a turn two Timna to start drawing you out of holes a lot of the time because not everybody's going to have creatures, and just gaining the extra 1 to 2 cards per turn can be such a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to sum it up, this hand, it does cast Flash turn 3. It doesn't, however, have access to black mana for Limdus Vault. It doesn't have any form of interaction. It doesn't cast Timna. But
It
in other
it
words,
doesn't do much. It goes for a win, but that's
yeah,
about it.
it goes for a win. If you don't win there, you've basically lost the game.
Yeah,
And I think we can say that on a deck like this that has such good consistency, this is often not what we need to go for.
Yeah, and you can definitely be a bit liberal with the mulligans in this deck, just because there are so many pieces that like actually do things or progress you towards winning the game. You can definitely mull hands if you're not sure if you want to keep them or not, and just look for better options.
Yep.
I go down to 6 a bunch, and I still win a bunch of those games just because you don't even need the 7th card sometimes, just because it's so card and mana efficient.
Yep. Okay, let's take a look at the second hand.
Sure. You want to read this one off?
Uh, I'd prefer if you do it. I'm having a bit of trouble seeing it from here.
Sounds good. So this hand has Entomb, Mystical Tutor, Mana Crypt, Tarnished Citadel, Summoner's Pact, Sylvan Library, and Eladomri's Call.
Okay, what do you think?
So this one's pretty much a snap keep for me. The Tarnished Citadel will make you pretty much all the mana that you need, which includes the blue from Mystical Tutor. The Mana Crypt is just gravy. The biggest appeal of this hand is that you can go turn 1 Mystical Tutor into turn 2 Summoner's Pact for Protean Hulk, and then just win the game by casting Flash.
Yeah.
That's always a nice one to hand. But even on top of that, if you say people are holding up blue mana on the turn when you would go for the Flash, instead you can just cast a Sylvan Library and start racking up cards,
Yep.
which is
And
pretty great.
if that's not good enough, you also just still have Entomb and Eladamri's Call to set up even more backup plans if you so desire.
Oh yeah, this hand just has backups upon backups upon backups on top of the turn 2 Flash Hulk.
Yep. This
I
is really, really
I
good.
think the one thing you would have to be careful about in this hand is not jamming the Flash, because as soon as you jam the Flash, it means that you've cast the Summoner's Pact, and that means that you're losing the next turn because you're not gonna have the mana to pay for it.
Yeah.
So
Unless, of
just
course, you
yeah,
rip another land off the top turn 2 or something.
yes. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this one's quite clear cut. I don't think there's a ton to talk about. Um,
Yeah.
let's move on to the last hand we've got today. This
Sure.
one is a bit weird.
It's a bit weird. So this hand has Mana Crypt, Lean In Relic Warder, Gilded Drake, Flusterstorm, Wild Growth, Overgrown Tomb, and Island in it. So this is a bit awkward. I think if you gave this to people that weren't particularly experienced in the deck or didn't really know what was going on or anything, you might get a couple of people that were keeping, I think.
Yeah, possibly.
Uh, but there are a couple of things that make this a lot more awkward than it might look at first. Because at first, you look at it and you're like, oh, well, I have 2 lands, a Mana Crypt, Wild Growth, some Counter Magic, a couple of creatures. I should be fine. Um, but you don't really have a direct path to the win or even any consistent path to the win here, which would be fine if you could cast Timna, which you also can't do because there's no white mana in this hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just yeah, just in general, like again, having the Timna can fix a lot of bad draws, but you have to be able to cast the Timna first and actually start racking in cards
Yeah,
to get there.
it's really interesting how, like, Timna being castable, not castable, is such a big deal in this deck. Like, she is your key engine, more or less.
Oh yeah, Timna being a card advantage engine in the command zone is actually like super important for a lot of the play lines for the deck. Where, say, you're in an interactive pod where you know you're not going to be able to jam through an early win, just sticking an early Timna and just grinding to victory with nothing but card advantage is a very valuable line of play to have.
Yeah, it's come in handy a number of times.
Yeah.
Okay, so those were a few sample opening hands. These are what you can expect when playing the deck. Overall, I think the hands I've had so far in goldfishing and actual games have leaned more towards the better side. I feel like this deck does have a lot of hands that it can just make work.
Yeah, there's a lot where if you hit just like a tutor and a combo piece, you're just good to go. There are a lot of hands I've had where other people have looked at them and been like, well, I don't know if I would keep this. It seems a bit awkward. And I'm just like, no, it's got an entomb and a creature tutor. That's like good enough. That'll win the game.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
power of the two tutors can do anything.
yeah. And also, big one too that I don't know if we mentioned is survival of the fittest and how much it can
Ooh,
fix draws.
yeah.
Is yeah, if you just have a survival of the fittest in your hand, this deck abuses that really hard. like
Mm-hmm.
like way harder than a lot of other Hulk decks actually, just because you could do stuff like get Apprentice Necromancer with it.
Yep.
And then once you have an Apprentice Necromancer and survival of the fittest on the board, you don't have to cast spells anymore to win the game.
Yeah, and that is super good. Okay, I think now we've said a lot about Shuffle Hulk. It's a very cool deck, very cool Hulk pile, and there's a lot of different things you can do with it. If there's anything to take away from this deck tech, along with all the info about the deck, I think it's that, especially for decks like this, it's important to think about the deck and to make adjustments that are going to work not just for the decks you're going to be playing against, but also for yourself as a player. One of the good things that we can do in competitive EDH is having the freedom of having 98 or 99 cards in our deck to adjust things. And Shuffle Hulk is a very, very good canvas that you can use to great success.
Oh yeah, the shell is super flexible. You just do whatever you want with it, honestly.
Yeah, it just works. And that's
Yeah.
what's so nice about it.
Oh yeah.
This has been a Lab Maniacs deck tech for Shuffle Hulk. I'm Sigi. Joining me was Sickrobot. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.